Nina X is a novel about a young woman who's lived her entire life in incarceration within a cult. This is a communist cult, or rather a communist collective that turned into a cult through the 90s and 2000s. Nina was raised within the confines of pure communist child rearing, and she was told a number of lies about the outside world that she was never allowed out into. So she was never given any toys, she was never shown TV. She was told that people outside the window were fascist survivors of a nuclear war, scavenging in the ruins of capitalism. She believed that rain was radiation. So setting foot out into the outside world is a huge challenge for Nina, and she has the help of some devoted and wonderful people, a charity worker and care workers that try to help Nina. In some ways, Nina X is a simple fish out of water story. It's a story about someone who's never experienced the modern world that we take for granted every day. So there's a kind of darkly comic aspect to some of Nina's encounters with mobile phones, with microwave food, with supermarket aisles stuffed with food, with just daily communication, with moving from A to B in cars. She's not familiar with this either. So there's this sort of tragic comic pathos to the whole thing, but there's a great sort of sadness as well, because Nina's been severely damaged by an ideological project which has failed. The idea, which was current from the beginning of communism up until the 90s really, that it was possible to raise an ideologically pure child, perfect Soviet child, someone who's not corrupted by capitalism. And daily she was raised with the necessity of recording her every thought and action in a diary, and her comrades would go through and they would score out all that she said that was incorrect, politically incorrect and improper. And so Nina had to go through her entire life editing her thoughts and actions for the eyes of her comrades, and this had a profound effect on her development. There's something unique about the way that Nina communicates, because she's been taught to self-critique and to never say the word I or the word me, because these are considered to be selfish and capitalistic. She has to literally in her diaries go through and cross out and erase any words that the collective consider to be problematic. So words like nice, like want, like need, like hug or kiss or love, or words that describe forbidden things like chocolate or photographs or magazines, things that she's not allowed to actually have access to. So in going through her diary and erasing all of these problematic words, she's having to rewrite her own history all the time, rewrite who she is herself, and it has a neurological effect on her development as she goes from childhood to being an adult. She's literally unable to say the word I, and the whole question is whether you can be a functioning human being who doesn't say I, who doesn't say me, who calls themselves by their own first name. So she'll say all the time, Nina needs to do this, Nina has to go here. As a result, people think that she's mentally deficient. The kind of care she could be put into if they think she is neurologically damaged is quite severe in comparison to the freedom that she could be granted in the outside world if she can prove that she's a normal functioning human being. So those are the stakes really in the story. Is Nina going to be able to say I? Is she going to become a fully fledged self? Or has she always actually been one, but it's just been hidden within this political language that she's had to use? I find it very disturbing, the exploration that I did into feral children. You might have heard of Caspar Hauser, and there was also an American girl called Jeannie. There have been some Russian children who've been found as well. Mowgli as well was another feral child. These are basically kids who've been brought up out with the confines of society, in some cases brought up with wild animals. Or in other cases just locked in rooms, complete isolation. So there's an element of that within the Nina story, and there's a great danger that Nina will be seen as one of these feral children and will basically be locked up again after she's been out in freedom. because the way that she communicates with people is not easy for people to understand what she's saying and what she means. But at the heart of it, we as readers, I think we sense that she's undamaged on some core level, that her humanity is intact, that she's capable of empathy, she's capable of relating to people. And so there's a real hope for the reader, and for me when I was writing it, that Nina's going to make it through. When I was researching Nina X, I came across 4 different Maoist collectives from the 1970s that had turned into cults by the 2000s. There was one in America called the O, which stood for the organization, that was exposed by Alexandra Stein. There was the Democratic Workers' Party in California, which was exposed by the theorist Janja Lalich. There's an organization called TVIND, Tvind, in Denmark. It began again with Maoist origins and ended up being a very large cult that extended across many different countries. And there was the cult in Lambeth in London, which Nina was probably most inspired by. But it's an interesting phenomenon. It's happened in Denmark, in America, and in Britain, and it's happened with similar results in each case. So you have these different small Mao Zedong political collectives scattered around Europe and America. And throughout the 80s and 90s, they were waiting for the great Chinese Revolution to spread around the world. So they saw themselves as part of the vanguard party of the coming revolution. And when that didn't happen, they became really cut off and isolated. And rather than just giving up post the fall of the Berlin Wall, they embedded themselves. They became more secretive, more insular, and they kept on conducting sort of Maoist self-interrogations, Maoist purges, all the kinds of self-monitoring and self-perfecting that goes on within a Maoist organization. So you would end up having the kind of all of the forces which were at work in the Chinese communist state going on in one small household or in one small collective. And these places became incredibly oppressive, with every single detail of people's lives being controlled by the leadership. People having to do confession, people having to inform on other people, even though there was just maybe 10, 15 people in some of these collectives. So it became a kind of universal phenomena across the world. These failed collectives started in the 70s and 80s, that then by the year 2000 had become completely cult-like in their organization and in their abuse of power. I did a lot of research for Nina X. Most of all probably was the fact that I came from a background which was very hard left in terms of politics. My dad was very much a revolutionary of the 1960s and 70s, and he took part in the turn of revolutionary politics into violent politics. In the 1970s, he became involved with an organisation called the Scottish National Liberation Army. He was a poet and a nationalist, and he believed that violence might be the only way possible to push forward the politics of liberation. So I kind of grew up in an environment where I was exposed to political purism and very strong ideological beliefs in the revolutionary tradition. And when I was in my 20s, I was a member of a communist party myself. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, and also the legacy of communism becoming apparent to us historically, the scale of the genocides, it became really important for me to actually write about that as a sort of guilty person, really. Someone who felt, what would it have been like had I been part of the collective that Nina was involved in at that time in the 80s and 90s? Would I have been as strict on this child? Would I have believed that you could bring up a child in ideological purity as her comrades believed? One of the things I hope people get from Nina is just a sense of Nina's character herself, her uniqueness, and her survival instinct, and the kind of magic in the way that she sees things, the incredible bravery, and the fascination that she shows when she's confronted with situations and systems that she simply just doesn't understand. She's got no preparation for. So it's really a story about trying to survive against all odds, as many fictional narratives are, as many life stories actually are. And it's also a story about survival in the post-ideological world, because like trying to find meaning in a world that doesn't seem to have any one narrative that explains everything. Because Nina was raised in an absolutely totalitarian mindset within a communist cult that had an answer for everything and that sorted everything out into the problematic and the correct. Now she's in the world of modern capitalism, and there's huge gaps in the story of how we're supposed to live. So in some ways, Nina is a way of getting us to ask ourselves, how should we be living, and how should we be relating towards people and caring for each other, caring for ourselves even, and what kind of things should we believe in and can we believe in, and where do the dangers lie in belief.